Today we got 3 keys to winning as a high-growth sales org. We got Justin Feit here from Lessonly, and seen the whole presentation. Some really interesting stuff. So pay attention, everyone, because you're about to get a lot of tactical and actionable knowledge on how to kind of build this high-growth sales org. Justin, why don't you give us the quick agenda here?
Yeah, sure. So we'll split this into 2 pieces. The first will be kind of a presentation. Max and I will cover some ground. I'll try to explain a fair bit of what I've experienced, what mistakes I've made. We'll talk about a framework that we've used, and then we'll jump into Q&A. It's a great opportunity to learn from each other.
Excellent. So real quickly, I'm Max Auschler. I'm the CEO of Sales Hacker. I'm your host today, so I will be butting in with some questions from time to time. I will be taking the questions from you, the audience, as you ask them in the GoToWebinar Q&A panel over here on the right side. So ask your questions there. We'll get to them either along the way if they fit in or after in the designated Q&A time. You can tweet at us as SHWebinar, and we'll get back to you after the webinar if you have any direct questions for me or Justin. And the recording, with the slides and everything, will be available on saleshacker.com in the next 48 hours or so. You'll get an email about it. Feel free to share it with your team and anybody else who you think will find relevant. And Justin, you want to take it from here?
Yep. Thanks, Max. Appreciate it. Glad to be here. Welcome, everybody. I am the Chief Sales Officer for Lessonly. We're based out of Indianapolis, software company focused on training, enablement, and learning. I wanted to start off by trying to take a step back and take a look back and give you a sense of some of the experience that I've had. I've worked for some great organizations and learned from some excellent people along the way, and would love to share kind of the learnings that I've had from that and make it as practical as possible. So thanks for attending this. I thought it might help to step back and look at some of the roles that I've had in my career, because I learned quite a bit from those various roles. My first job out of school was a software engineer. I learned a very important lesson there, which was the precision of work necessary to be an engineer was beyond my capacity. I just wasn't that good at it. And it was a great lesson to carry forward building organizations because it made me realize the importance of understanding the personal limitations of both yourself but also of your team. And that is just critical when you're trying to construct something, especially in a high growth mode. My first sales job, my first startup, software startup, was as a sales engineer. I think the best learning there was clarification of value, because it was my first exposure to a customer, to focusing on customers and understanding what it is around what it is you need to understand from a client in order to satisfy what they need. Later roles around sales management, and leadership really focused primarily on, I would say the keys coming out of those roles were efficiency, balance, and prioritization. I think as a sales rep and as a sales manager, efficiency in the process is critical. It's very easy for reps and organizations to bounce between the top of the funnel and the bottom of the funnel. I think the more you can get a steady cadence of going through each of those phases, it becomes really valuable. And then into later phases were lessons around balance, focus, and prioritization as a leader. So those were some of the keys that felt like they stood out as ways to things to consider when we were constructing organizations, when we are constructing organizations as sales professionals. When I look at the mistakes, and there were plenty of them, I look back on some major themes that seem to recur through my experiences that I saw myself doing, I saw organizations doing. I certainly participated in these. One of them was have this idea that everybody thinks like you, and as a rep and as a manager, it's really problematic when you begin to think that everyone approaches material, approaches a problem the same way you do. It's really an easy mistake to make, and one I've made many times. Realizing that your personnel, your reps, your customers will come at the problems that you see or that they see maybe very differently than you are as a rep or you are as a manager or your reps are as you look at it as a manager. That's really critical to keep in mind. The second one was Magic Bullet. I'm sure people appreciate this, but it was looking at any one thing and over-optimizing for it. This one tool, this one deal, this one part of the process. It's not that simple. I don't think there's very many cases or situations in the kind of sales that we do where one thing is going to solve every problem. These are complex organizations. Growing is in itself very complex. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's easy to fall into that that line of thinking that one thing will do it. I think the third was the mistake of overcommitting. I still do this. It's something that I watch out for, which is a great idea, something to add to your team, something to add to your reps, something to add to your process, without considering where do those cycles come from. It is very easy to have 14 great ideas and try to get 14 things going and have none of them work. So be more realistic around what it is you're trying to change. Don't change too many things at the same time. I know that's easy to say and very hard to do, but I think you can look at the chaos that we can create as managers and leaders of small organizations and growing organizations of any size, actually, and just overwhelm people. It's the adoption, and we'll talk about learning and enablement a little bit later, but adopting new things is just a challenge in itself, so be careful about your level of commitment. One key lesson I learned from a great manager I worked with, Andy Kofoid, he was the COO at ExactTarget, and he's the COO still at Salesforce Marketing Cloud, was don't underhire. In a sales organization, our models are built on the fact that you're going to add people to the organization, and they're going to carry quota, and they're going to be productive. You cannot fall behind. Andy did a great job of beating the hell out of us as managers to keep up with that hiring. And you don't need a large organization to do this. It can happen. We do it, and we're fairly small at Lessonly. We have a cadence where we go through every manager as a hire, reports on it like a forecast call, and we do everything we can to keep from falling behind. It's really critical. You fall 2 quarters behind your hiring, there's almost no way to catch up. You can't onboard twice as many people as you had planned. If you can avoid that at all costs, please do. And the last thing is trying to slow things down. I think the reality of our modern world and what we're going through as organizations that are growing is that we simply can't slow the bus down. Like the rate of data coming, we'll talk about that in a second, but the rate of data coming at us, the rate of insights coming at us, the way we want to change our orgs, the pace of competition, the pace of the market evolution, it's fast. And you have to find models and approaches that keep up with it. You can't slow it down. So let me transition here. We're all in organizations that are growing very fast, right? We want these organizations to grow very fast. It's a modern era we're in, and the reality is that the data and the amount of change that's coming at us is not sufficient to think of training and learning as some monolithic activity. If you look back on organizations you might have been with in the past, training rolled out every quarter. Everything that changed in the organization could come at every 90 days. That model simply doesn't work. Where the rate of change in our organizations is just simply too fast for monolithic training to keep up with that. Case in point, I think the rate of data, Max Yoder, our CEO, talks about this a lot, which is it's unprecedented amount of data that's coming at us, which is giving us unprecedented amounts of insights and knowledge about what it is that's going on in our organizations, which is giving us an opportunity to introduce all kinds of changes. there is no getting around that. The approach, however, that you can take is to break up what it is you're trying to help people understand. If knowledge is the key, if enablement and understanding this new environment that we're all in is the key, then maybe the most viable approach is to disassemble that knowledge into smaller, more available pieces and allow those to get absorbed. Because we all know that trying to master something at one sitting is simply not a practical approach. Proficiency initially is much more valuable. So deliver information in a much more incremental approach is a much more effective model for keeping up with these aspects. I think that sounds I think that sounds very obvious, but in reality, we kind of don't do that as an industry. Organizations just tend not to do that. They tend to collect a lot of information together and then dole that out in larger chunks. It's a little more, it seems more efficient. It seems easier to do. You get higher fidelity material, but that just doesn't keep up with the approach that people need to take in order to keep up with what's happening. So specific to an approach, let's make this a little bit more practical and not so much theory. This is how I view the world. This is how Lessonly views the world, and this is not, this isn't some special algorithm or rocket science. This probably feels very natural to a lot of you, but I think that's part of why it works so well, which is this feels to me to be exactly how I've really learned all along. In all the tasks that I've been asked to accomplish, is to think of this process in terms of these three phases: learn, practice, and perform. It really makes a lot of sense to think of the way your reps and your teams will get up to the level of performance that you need them to get up to. If jumping into just an absolute practical approach, we do this. This is an earlier version of an actual Google spreadsheet that we used early on to devise how we would approach this learn, practice, and perform strategy. And it was really around breaking down the capability, the skills that our organization needed. Those are listed down in column C there. And then identify the particular mappings to learn, practice, and perform. So we use that framework, learn, practice, and perform, as a way to say, for this particular skill, what activity, what we call them lessons, but what activity really served to instrument and educate and enable our team to be able to go through these steps. So our first call, you see there, was really broken down into the activities that were part of each of those phases. It allowed us to subdivide the complexities of the problem and break those into pieces. And I'll talk about why it's so important to break that down in just a bit, but this is just a practical example of how we divided that down. So let's step up a level here and kind of talk about each of these phases and the way that it made sense to us and the way we help our customers understand and tackle the problems that they have. The first is the most, is I would say, completely foundational. Whether you're trying to accomplish any task with any body of knowledge, you have to capture the essence of that body of knowledge. And really, this is to create kind of a foundational layer of information that you're going to share with your team, sales reps, SDRs, whatever part of your sales organization you need to drive. Creating this framework will, creating a repository, if you will help you drive that. The first barrier, the most important aspect of this, is engagement. I know it sounds very, very common to say that, but a lot, if you really look at it, a lot of people look at high fidelity. They look at correlation to results. They look at a lot of very sophisticated aspects of their learning program, of their enablement and sales training, when they're missing potentially a great opportunity to just make a lot of progress simply by improving the level of engagement. If you do not get your team to engage with the material, and we'll talk about what that means, you simply cannot make progress. They will not pick up as fast as you need them to the level of information there. So engagement is critical. This platform of Learn is actually applied to two key areas initially that are really, really important. One is, if we're growing, we're always bringing new people on board. And every sales manager knows that ramping their reps it's absolutely correlated to success. If you can't ramp your reps as fast as your model requires, you will not meet your model. It's as simple as that. If you don't know what your ramp is, you need to understand what that is, because it is completely, your success is completely dependent. I should say steady, consistent success is completely dependent on whether you can ramp your people as fast as your model dictates. So that's a key area. The other is inclusion of new information. We talked about how our organizations are completely surrounded by all this new information, whether that's pricing changes, product changes, integrations, environmental shifts, competitive shifts. All these things are coming on board. That environment, your Learn environment, your Learn phase of your program really needs to embody that for that particular aspect. The other aspect of this Learn phase, if you will, is what we call push and pull. The ability for you not just to have this repository in Google, right? It's very easy if you have 10 people, you can put stuff in Google Drive, share it that way. That's probably sufficient, right? You're all in one office. That might be sufficient. That might be all you need. But as you grow, and as you grow in complexity, in size and complexity, you're going to need something a little more proactive. So we think of it as a push and a pull model. Push meaning I am going to be able to get this to you. I'm going to get this material to you. It's not going to come in email. That is push, but that's not what I mean. I mean the ability to assign something to somebody and say, hey, take this, read this, consume this. That's what we mean by push. Pull is having a repository, if you will, of material and assets where somebody can get to. And it's underneath pull really is the ability to say, let's say find something, of course, good search. But the other aspect is it's got to be up to date. Right? If your material was good 6 months ago, 2 quarters ago, no one's going to go there. If that pricing is out of date, if that competitive information is out of date, if it's 2 quarters old, they just won't go there. And you will lose the engagement that you need for them to improve. So this is a critical aspect of the Learn phase. The other aspect is guidance. Is as we get into as your organization gets more into defining roles and personas of your sales professionals, you're probably going to start to construct what we call paths, but it's just an organized way to say go through this material. Whether you're a new employee, you might have a path. Whether you're an AE or an SDR, you might have a path. These are ways to really structure the adoption of the material and the flow of information to your rep in a way that they can absorb, that comes in the order that you think makes the most sense. You've been here for a while. You probably have a good idea as a manager what makes sense. You can see here that this is an example of ours, which is really our mission, vision, and values, and what being an ideal team player is. Those are fundamentals, right? Our culture is incredibly important to us at Lessonly, and as a result, those are foundational, right? We want you to really understand that. As you move down, it moves more into more and more specific information. Here it's commercial personas. You know, what are the types of people that we work with? What are the types of prospects and customers that we address? And then further goes down into our product information and areas of that nature. So you can really guide where this has to go. This keep in mind, this is important only if you can keep this up to date. If you do this statically, it will be a very modest value. It is not something that you can do and it just lasts all year. I think your environments are, if you're anything like ours, you're growing very fast, you need to keep up with the environment that you're in, and you have to be able to maintain this. That's why the ease of being able to do this is so critical. So don't over-engineer, don't allow it to be over-engineered. And this is really a departure between modern and traditional approaches to learning. We're talking about here for us, this is modern learning. This stuff is changing it could be every 30 days. It literally could be every 30 days. You have to have an approach and a system in place that allows you to modify it quickly, because that's what your environment requires. So let's step to practice. This is really a very powerful aspect, and I think this is where engagement really matters, and interactivity with what it is, the learning, the knowledge that you're trying to impart. I'd say the first thing to keep in mind is you need to think broadly about practice. The first thing that comes to my mind is recording a sales rep on a call. That's really valuable, right? You get to hear them in the call and how they respond and how they handled that situation. That's actually really valuable. But think about practice as more broad than that, because that's a given response. What you probably don't want is a lot of mimicry where say these words, look for this, when you hear this, say this. That's risky. And the reason is because we all know as sales professionals, every single call is different. There's no two calls that look a lot alike. Now, what you can do is look beneath that response and begin to exercise and have your reps practice the thoughtful, do they understand how to build a response? And that comes in the form of other things, right? We use engagement heavily as part of our practice. Our customers do. Really, it's exercising the thoughtfulness around that competitive question, that pricing objection, things of that nature. You need to get your teams thinking about how to respond, and it doesn't all come out in calls, right? Those don't manifest themselves always in calls that you have access to. So the ability to be able to complement recording a call with being able to have that rep exercise their intellect around that topic is really the instrumentation you need to fully create a more comprehensive practice. The other aspect, as I said before, you'll see this theme come up again and again, which is breaking down complex skills into sub-skills, something that you can really address that helps an organization break that, a team kind of start to decompose the various behaviors that you want, and you can concentrate on those. So in that practice phase, that really makes a big difference. The last point is on the side of practice is consider the learner and the coach, right? Recording 55 calls and not listening to them because you don't have time is not going to help. The coach has to have some ability to scale practice, right? Part of that is that push-pull model. Part of that is you telling your rep to go do this particular skill. The other part of it is having the rep be able to go through those exercises, repeat and go back through the questions around that particular skill, positioning, competitive pricing, go back on their own and revisit those. So allowing them to learn at their own pace and decouple the coach from the learner is really valuable in this phase because it helps with scale. And the last phase is perform. I think it's very natural to think of performance in terms of from a manager's perspective and thinking of that in terms of metrics. And that's really valuable. The ability to the ability to instrument what is happening. Certainly you can think of things sophisticated like correlate your consumption of learning with your sales results. Right? We do that, we tie that together inside of Salesforce in our integration and allow for that to happen. But there are many more layers to addressing performance. One of them is allowing a manager to address, make something actionable. It's very easy to say this rep is behind on their quota, right? They're falling behind. They're not going to make their number. That is hard to act on, right? That is not really something you can act on. You can be worried about it. You can be concerned. You can note that, but it's like, okay, what are you going to do? Right? It has to turn into something that the rep can participate in, or the organization can participate in. It's like it's got to be more actionable than that, which is why subdividing these tasks allows you to more accurately determine what is keeping that rep from making their number. Is it that they're not making enough calls, their conversion rate is low, their ability to their pricing, they're giving away, they're discounting too much. It's like, what specifically is going on? Now, anecdotally, we do that all the time as managers. We're constantly getting underneath the covers and trying to figure that out. But wouldn't it be nice if you had some data to help you understand that? I look at data all the time and look at performance across or consumption across these lessons, and I can actually see who does not understand how to position against one of our competitors, or who does not understand an aspect of our marketplace. I can actually see that. So then we can do something about it, whether it's engage with that rep directly, refine the material, because maybe we're confusing them with our material. So it gives us something to focus on. So of course, as I said, you're going to want some insight. You're going to need something to work on. And the more the more precise that is, perhaps, or I shouldn't say the more precise, the more actionable it is, the more specific it might be, the more a manager or a team can then go address it. It's just important to be able to see. These are some screenshots of what we look at daily to help our customers. But really, it's the insights to be able to say, where should I focus? The other aspect, and I touched on this earlier, which is the corrective action needs to be specific and has to be something that can be done now. If it takes a month to get back to someone to fix an issue, that just is too slow. You're going to need something that is actionable. That's why your ability for a manager to respond in some way to a need, besides, oh, I need to get on more calls, I need to go travel with that rep, right? That is actually effective, but it cannot scale. In today's world, I'm sure most of you are in these environments. You probably are distributed. You're working in different time zones. You might be in different countries for all that. You're just not going to be able to synchronize, and your span of control from manager to rep is probably 8, right, or better, right? So trying to do this manually at the speed we need to do it now is hard. So you need to choose an approach. You need to develop an approach that allows a manager to do something about it at scale. So creating material quickly, knowing what material to create, getting that to people, making sure they consume it. Those steps are important, right? This isn't theoretical learning. This isn't compliance related. This is, I need to make this quarter. I need to make this quarter. How do I make my people better? How do I help them? Instrumenting and being able to act upon that is really valuable. So the last point is, okay, let's make sure all these activities, let's make sure the aggregate of all these activities that we're going through is actually aligning with our business objectives. Like, what are you measuring your program against? You can certainly pull out various metrics, and there's always value. There's always value in a culture to say we are helping people learn, we're allowing them to improve, we're helping them improve. Those are all great. Those are really, really valuable. But this helps you align your learning effort, your investments, what it is you're trying to, your dedication to this. So you have somebody dedicated to sales enablement. This helps to align that. What you're looking at here is a graph. This is actually a customer graph, but it really shows. I talked about knowing what your ramp time is. You do need to know what your ramp time is, and that red line is a standard ramp that we had in our client situation, and the yellow line is what they were achieving after they began to adopt some of these approaches that we're talking about here. Two major factors here. Their first desire was they had just taken on funding. They were behind the curve. They were in trouble in some ways because they had committed to major growth, and their model just did not allow for that kind of growth. And they could tell from their ramp time that they weren't going to be able to get to where they had committed to getting to. So they had to adopt a new approach, and that new approach was initiated to get them to a faster ramp, which you see, achieving that ramp level. What was really interesting for this customer is I think, they not only saw the impact at the ramp, but they saw the overall, over time, they saw higher productivity, sustained higher productivity through the approach. They were very, very excited to see that kind of data. So I wanted to make sure we had a lot of time for questions and answers, but I want to just touch on a couple of these points, which is the world we live in is unforgiving. As sales organizations and sales professionals, the pace and the pressure is significant, which means we need approaches that are in line with that. And we tend to throw the word around modern, but it really is a departure from traditional approaches, especially with respect to training and enablement and learning that is needed for an organization like most of ours in order to keep up with what we're keeping up with. The number of people we need to bring on board, the amount of information that they must consume, and the rate of change that all of those things are subject to. Those are things that we really need to find an approach that helps address it.
Excellent. Really good stuff. I took a lot of notes here. Please, if you have questions from the audience, definitely ask in the Q&A tab. Justin, I have a couple questions for you in my note-taking.
Sure.
I was typing away furiously. So when you're kind of grading your reps, do you have like a rubric that you usually use? Did you have like an image for that, or is there a way that you do that currently?
Yeah, so we use our own environment, and we've, as I said, we structured our program, our learning program, using that framework. Our platform actually provides the rubric that allows us to compartmentalize our learning into courses, lessons, paths, and we see progress. And I think there was a screenshot there early on. That one right there. So the lower right is really the ability to dial into a particular part of my organization, and allow. You see three courses there, three lessons really. Advancing deals with Intercom. So those are employees and the completion level, and you can click into go a layer deeper into, okay, what specifically, this is an aggregate, so I can see at an aggregate level, but you can dial right in there and be able to say, okay, what specifically has this person not completed, or if they have completed it, how effective was that material? Did they actually get it? And so dialing in that way is this gives me a good sense of engagement. Is my material being consumed?
Yeah. And who within your organization is owning this? Is this the individual sales managers, the sales ops person, the sales enablement person? Who's the owner for this? Yeah. And how do they work to run coaching or one-to-one sessions or feedback sessions?
Yep. So the owners really, we talk about it as democratized. Really what we're trying to make sure is the managers of the teams, and so us, the managers of our CX team, the managers of our SDR team, the managers of our AE teams, all are participating in this. If you lower the barrier to entry and make the creation process, the engagement, the ability to engage with material easy, then you can get the help, because those managers know what they're doing, right? I don't want to put, as much as I love our HR person, I don't want to put all of that and single thread that through our HR team, because that's not what HR, their main focus is. So this is very naturally fitting into, sales, our support team, our ops participate in this, of course, but they are the owners of this. We have sales enablement. They're kind of the overarching, let's say, final owner of this overall process, but the actual construction comes from the managers.
Okay, and so to set this up in the first place, you usually have sales enablement that takes ownership over it, whether or not they do it through your platform or they're doing it, through Google Docs or on their own. It's usually a sales enablement function that ropes in the managers and says, okay, what do we need to start with? Or how does it get created from scratch?
Yeah, I think it started the other way. I think it started with, let's take, when you think about our philosophy evolved to, we kind of started out, but it really revolves around learner first, which is, we took a very pragmatic, simple approach, which is, what is it our reps need? And the reps and the managers knew what that was, so they began to create material. That material began to grow, then we began to organize it. I think when you reach a certain level, someone who sits above this, right, the spreadsheet that I showed about the alignment from skill to learn, practice, and perform, and inside each of those cells were a list of lessons that our managers and our leaders think that those are critical to be part of that, for that skill to be developed. So someone sitting aside and making sure that, it stays focused, it stays up to date, that's always an assist, right? Having an assist, but it's really designed. The most effective approach is you have to have involvement from these roles that really understand that understand the function, and that's sales management.
Interesting, and you see that the frontline reps are probably the ones that are passing along the best practices. Like, hey, we should incorporate this. I've been trying this tactic recently, or talking about X, Y, and Z, and it's been working. So how do you train the rest of the reps on that? They all circle back and keep adding to it over time.
That's exactly right.
Kind of
think about how it. Think about how it happens, more organically. People just start commenting on Slack, right? You get all kinds of ideas floating around Slack, and you really don't have consistency across there. And it's a great community tool to kind of share ideas, but to formalize that just one more step more formal, to have someone. I have a great rep. She's great at prospecting. I asked her to create a lesson on prospecting. So she created it. She didn't publish it, but she created it so one of our managers could curate it. Let's just scrub it, make sure it was complete and good enough, and then we published it. And that process takes 3 days, a day. It can take, you can make it in an hour. So it's really easy to evolve. Remember, one of the keys here is this doesn't have value if we do it once and then we don't really do it again for another 6 months.
How do you build that into your culture? And, because, if you're a frontline rep and you're like, oh, well, I'm making commission on deals that I'm closing, and now I have to spend a couple hours here and there, putting this, process together. How do you build a culture around getting people to buy into, taking that time and do things that aren't counting towards their commission? Do you provide bonuses, or do you, what's the way to do that?
We certainly. Yeah, I think in the long run, it's got to be part of your culture to be thinking that the success of everyone matters. I mean, I can't say that enough. I can't say I've been on both sides of that. I've been in some great cultures. I've been in some really dysfunctional ones, and I really can't say that if you want the long run, if you want someone to be successful, if you want the best out of your people, you've got to create a culture where that is part of it, where helping others is just part of my job. Now, if you try to saddle them with something that's really hard, that's not cool. That won't work very well. So the barrier has to be super low. You can't say spend 4 hours creating something. That's ridiculous. It's not necessary. You don't need to spend 4 hours to translate value. You can spend 45 minutes, and I don't think that's too much to ask from an organization. But if you let that get out of hand, and someone's got to create some video, and it's going to take me 4 hours, and that's not going to scale.
Yeah, and that's why people use the newer systems like these, because it makes it a lot easier to do. I think the last question that we have for you today is, it's a pretty meaty one, but you've done this at IBM, ExactTarget, Salesforce, so some big companies. Lessonly is probably the smallest company that you've been able to do this with. Does it change pretty rapidly or pretty drastically from a couple thousand employee company to a 10 or 20 rep, 30 rep company? And how does it change as that scales over time?
Yeah, so I think ironically, I think smaller companies do it better. I think they realize that there's less flexibility in a small company, right? You don't have unlimited resources. You can't afford to make it too complex. Like, you really can't. Like, that's why Google Docs works if you're 10 under or 10 or under. It's like that makes a ton of sense. Use that. It's free and it works. But as companies get bigger, I think they fall into this idea that it has to be more formal, and they drift away from because they can. They do, and so they invest in more complex, more high fidelity materials, and that's great if you're doing a video of your CEO and it's all about your mission, vision, and values. That's probably not going to change. So yeah, make it snazzy, invest some time, and spend a little money. But to try to do that for the rate of practical help that sales organizations and sales reps need right now, that's where bigger organizations fall down. So that's what we're seeing in the marketplace right now. It's the larger, more progressive organizations are realizing, at the team level anyway, they're realizing that I cannot survive this pace if I don't find something more responsive. And so larger organizations at the team level do see it. They do respond, and they do find ways to kind of take a modern approach at this. I'd say, enterprise-wide, that we've got a long way to go before people, kind of realize the individual contributor needs to be more at the center of this equation. As we say, learner first.
Yeah, definitely. The feedback loops at smaller companies, it's easier to kind of iterate on those things. It's easier to keep that in a Google Doc. Their companies are less flexible, but things also change a lot more because they're like still building and testing, where the bigger companies kind of have it figured out in a lot of ways. So we've done those Google Doc things plenty of times, and when you're a small company, it seems to work out that way. So, Justin, thank you so much. What's the best way for people to reach you?
I would say my email is justin.fight@lessonly.com, or reach out to the general number through info@lessonly.com. You can reach me. Happy to try to answer any questions that anyone might have, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Definitely. We're going to send you we're going to send you the questions that were asked in the GoToWebinar, and you can follow up with people individually. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Again, this recording will be available in the next 48 hours on saleshacker.com. You'll receive an email about it. Feel free to share around. Justin and Lessonly, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Max.